Shout hallelujah, shout hallelujah, shout hallelujah unto the Lord. Sing it again, say, shout hallelujah. We're singing, shout hallelujah, shout hallelujah unto the Lord.
Good evening and welcome to the Beltline Church of Christ and the Discovery Bible Study. We are so glad you joined us this evening. We are in Judges chapter 19. We're going to dive right in. We got a whole lot of verses to read, to cover, to get through what we want to cover today. And so Trey's going to be reading Judges 19, 1 through 30 from the New Living Translation. And so we hope you'll follow along with us in what you're reading. And let's see where God leads us. Trey, take it away.
All right. Now in those days, Israel had no king, just in case.
In case we forgot.
Yeah, we've been starting off every chapter like that here lately, haven't we? There was a man from the tribe of Levi living in a remote area of the hill country of Ephraim. One day he brought home a woman from Bethlehem in Judah to be his concubine. But she became angry with him, and she returned to her father's home in Bethlehem. After about 4 months, her husband set out for Bethlehem to speak personally to her and persuade her to come back. He took with him a servant and a pair of donkeys, and when he arrived at her father's house, her father saw him and welcomed him. Her father urged him to stay a while, so he stayed 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. On the 4th day, the man was up early, ready to leave, but the woman's father said to his son-in-law, "Have something to eat before you go." So the two men sat down together and had something to eat and drink. And then the woman's father said, "Please stay another night and enjoy yourself." The man got up to leave, but his father-in-law kept urging him to stay, so he finally gave in and stayed the night. On the morning of the 5th day, he was up early again, ready to leave, and again the woman's father said, "Have something to eat, and then you can leave later this afternoon." So they had another day of feasting. Later, as the man and his concubine and servant were preparing to leave, his father-in-law said, "Look, it's almost evening. Just stay the night and enjoy yourself. Tomorrow you can get up early and be on your way." But this time the man was determined to leave, so he took his 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine and headed in the direction of Jebus, that is, Jerusalem. It was late in the day when they neared Jebus, and the man's servant said to him, "Let's stop at this Jebusite town and spend the night there." "No," his master said, "we can't stay in this foreign town where there are no Israelites. Instead, we will go on to Geba. Come on, let's try to get as far as Geba or Ramah, and we'll spend the night in one of those towns." So they went on. The sun was setting as they came to Geba, the town in the land of Benjamin. So they stopped there to spend the night. They rested in the town square, but no one took them in for the night. That evening, an old man came home from his work in the fields, and he was in the hill country of Ephraim, but he was living in Geba, where the people were from the tribe of Benjamin. When he saw the travelers sitting in the town square, he asked them where they were from and where they were going. "We have been in Bethlehem in Judah," the man replied. "We're on our way to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim, which is my home. I traveled from Bethlehem, and now I'm returning home. But no one has taken us in for the night, even though we have everything we need. We have straw and we have feed for our donkeys and plenty of bread and wine for ourselves." "Well, you're welcome to stay with me," the old man said. "I will give you anything you might need, but whatever you do, don't spend the night in the square." So he took them home with him and fed the donkeys, and after they washed their feet, they ate and drank together. While they were enjoying themselves, a crowd of troublemakers from the town surrounded the house. They began beating at the door and shouting to the old man, "Bring out the man who's staying with you so we can have sex with him." The old man stepped outside to talk to them. "No, my brothers, don't do such an evil thing, for this man is a guest in my house, and such a thing would be shameful. Here, take my virgin daughter and this man's concubine. I will bring them out to you, and you can abuse them and do whatever you like, but don't do such a shameful thing to this man." But they wouldn't listen to him. So the Levite took hold of his concubine and pushed her out the door. The men of the town abused her all night, taking turns raping her until morning. Finally, at dawn, they let her go. At daybreak, the woman returned to the house where her husband was staying. She collapsed at the door of the house and laid there until it was light. When her husband opened the door to leave, there lay his concubine with her hands on the threshold. He said, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. So he put her body on his donkey and took her home. When he got home, he took a knife and cut his concubine's body into 12 pieces And then he sent one piece to each tribe throughout all the territory of Israel. Everyone who saw it said, "Such a horrible crime has not been committed in all the time since Israel left Egypt. Think about it. What are we going to do? Who's going to speak up?"
I hate this story.
It's the worst.
Chapter 20?
Yeah, can we just move to chapter 20? Let's just
Yeah.
keep reading, and although it doesn't get any better in 20
I know.
either. So,
This is terrible.
well, let's get into our questions. Before we get into our questions, I think it's important to say, I'm sure you already know this, but the Bible is not justifying any of this. It's
No.
not saying any of this is right, any of this is good. It is just simply saying what happened. It is reporting the facts as they happened in that time during this season, and it's very, very disturbing. But again, Jesus, God, they're not putting a stamp of approval on this attitude or this action. This is what happens when you remove God from the picture. So,
Well, and that's exactly where I wanted to go with the first question. Okay, where do you
what
see
is
God?
the first question?
Where do you see God in this passage? Okay, the point is you don't. Okay, you don't see God in this passage, and I think that should speak volumes to us. And it comes from the very first verse, as I was reading. Now, in those days, Israel had no king. They had expelled God from their presence. They didn't want Him there, and they had refused to allow Him to influence them for what was right. And this is what happens. This is where human beings go and what they become without God, without His presence. And so, like you said, this is in the Bible, but it is not something that is being taught to us as approved by God. It's something that is showing us the absence of God's influence and the absence of God in the lives of these people, and this is how far they have sunk and what they have become.
Because there was a king.
There was.
They just refused to follow him.
Yeah.
Or refused to accept him as their king.
Yeah.
So, and they're so far away from God, it's crazy.
Yeah.
I find it interesting, this shame and honor culture. Obviously this old man who took them in had some kind of understanding of who God was. Now, it's just disturbing to me that he was willing to sacrifice this man's concubine and his own daughter, who he didn't ultimately have to send out there.
Right.
But the hospitality was so important to them that it even took a precedence over people. I don't know where that comes from. And so he has some kind of understanding of God, because I believe he knows he's supposed to take in the stranger. But
Right.
at the same time, it sounds a lot like Abraham and Lot and everything that happened back in Genesis when the same kind of thing happened. It's just so disturbing. And I don't even know if that has anything to do with God. I think you already nailed it, that there's nothing to say about God here because he's not pictured here.
Because they totally abandoned God, not God abandoning them.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
Well, this could be a really quick study tonight, so let's
Yeah.
move on to question number 2.
question number 2, what do we learn about people from these passages? What do we learn about people from these passages? Evil is all around us. And sometimes even when you're trying to do good, something around you falls apart. And I would love to say you turn back to God, but in this story,
Yeah, they
there's
don't.
not. I don't know. I feel like I'm stretched on this one, because it's like the whole story is like, what was his father-in-law's motive for
Right.
trying to keep him there longer? I love the old man. He's coming he's traveled a long way, but yet to him, it's like kind of what you're saying. It's like, please don't stay at the square.
Mhm.
Just come to my house. Let me take care of you. I love his attitude, but then it changes to where it's like, what are you thinking?
Yeah. Well, and he says that because I think he knows the people of his town.
Yeah.
I think he knows
Knows
that
they
if he
would come
stays
get
in there, not just the concubine, but this man's going to be abused as
Yeah.
well. It's disturbing on all fronts. You got something over there.
Well, I was just thinking, I think the parallel to this is Romans chapter 1, and it talks about
Right.
the absence of God and what it became. And I mean, short of reading verse 18 all the way through 32 in Romans chapter 1, it basically describes this situation. It basically says, listen, people will become the worst of themselves if left to themselves, without
Right.
the godly influence and without recognizing who he was. And some, you pointed out that this man at least knew that he was not supposed to leave strangers in the courtyard. And that's part of the old law. This is part of who Israelite were called to be. They were supposed to take in the strangers. They were supposed to house them, and there wasn't supposed to be anybody left outside like that. And so that was an expectation of Israelites. That's one of the reasons we read about this man. He said, "No, we got to get to a town where there's Israelites." Why? Well, because Israelites would have had a law that said you don't leave somebody sitting in the square. You bring them in, you care for them, and then they'll be on their way the next day. And so
let me stop you right there before you move on and say, isn't it interesting that he went further to stay with the Israelites, and he would have been better off staying with unbelievers,
right.
Because it makes clear at the end, this hasn't even happened among the Gentiles, right? I mean, since we left Egypt, we've not seen something like this. It's just disturbing.
That's a huge point. I think that's a big deal. And while not as extreme, praise God. While not as extreme, we can make an application to ourselves. Okay, people are being abused all over the world, even right now, and where we can step in and make a difference in the small things that we do have contact with. We can't necessarily. We don't have a way to jump on a plane and fly into Ukraine and fight off the people who are terrorizing these people and somehow save these. We can't necessarily do that, but we can notice that our neighbors are having trouble in their marriage. We can notice that there's kids that have no one to teach them or to play with them or to encourage them or bring them to church. We can notice those things that are around us that eventually could lead to things like this when God's left out. And so step in to the pain of someone else, and when you step into that pain, you go into it with the mindset of serving and bringing it back, bringing it out of that, restoring order, restoring health, restoring the Lord, in their life. And so that's the mindset that Israelites should have had, but that Christians absolutely must have. And it may not be, this great grand scale of saving a country or saving a nation, but it could be one. And so serve that one person who you can serve.
That's good. And that's the question, right? The very last verse. What are we going to do? Who's going to speak up? I mean, maybe that's the takeaway for us. Again, not at this scale, but what are we going to do? Are we going to speak up? Are we going to try to speak truth into horrible situations that we find ourselves in? Or are we just going to say, kind of like this? I mean, this Levite, the way he's pictured in this story, it's just disgusting. So he throws her out there, and it's almost like he throws her out there, closes the door, and they go back to doing their thing while she's getting raped and who knows what else. And then she's laying there, and he's like, "Come, get up, let's go." Like no value of human life whatsoever. And it's just, I mean, if you want a picture of how women were treated in that culture, you don't have to look much further than that. Now, is this an extreme case? Probably. But it's still, the value that they placed on a human life was so minimal. And it's disturbing in every possible way.
But he's willing to go so far to get her.
Right.
And on the journey back, it's like, okay, whatever.
Right. I don't get it.
Yeah.
I also think about her dad, and this is maybe a stretch. Obviously he loved her, and that's why he was doing the partying and all of that. Let me just keep her another day. Let me keep her. But if he hadn't kept him and let them leave in the morning, then they would have got where they needed to go, and this wouldn't have happened. And who knows? Did he even hear this story? We don't know. We don't know how that all went down, but it's just, like I said, I have been dreading this chapter since we started, because there's just nothing good here, nothing good at all.
And I think that's the point, is to help us understand how bad it can be. And the good news, if there is that we know the rest of the story. We actually know that Jesus did come, that he did sacrifice himself, and that he did save us from ourselves, and he saved us from this type of behavior, and he showed us a better way. And he brought equality to women, and that is where women find their equality, and not until Jesus, and so number one, to remember that, and to hold them up, and to love them and to cherish them as we should, because this is what our God always intended.
Right.
But Jesus absolutely nailed that down and made it perfectly clear, and encouraged women and called women and sent women to bring the greatest messages that have ever been delivered, and showed us how important it is for us to treasure life. And gender really has nothing to do with it. A person is made in the image of God, and they must be respected and must be honored, no matter who they are, where they are, or what they are.
Well, you're looking at something there, Keith. What do you got?
Well, I was trying to make sure before I said it. This might be a stretch too. I love how God is light, and how sin or the world is the absence of light. And I've always pictured this as happening at night. And I think your version even said they came at night.
Right.
Because you think, okay, it's like everything, and I'm not pushing the zombies and all like that, but it's kind of neat how it's like during the day they're all working hard, they're taking care of their families, that they're being normal human beings. But then at night, when God, okay, I know God's not in here, I know that's a stretch, but when the light leaves, their evilness comes out, and it just shows how terrible and how wicked they are.
Well, I mean, that's John 3, isn't it? I mean, he says that the light shone in the darkness.
Right.
Darkness didn't comprehend it. You know, as you walk through, he talks about people do their deeds at night when they think nobody's watching.
Nobody's watching.
That's right. So,
because we're hidden.
That's right. But we're
But
not.
God is always watching. God is watching, and you're watching.
Mhm.
So.
All
I
right,
don't
question number 3.
This is the one I'm also dreading. How will you put this into practice? How will you put this into practice? I don't know. It's like,
Show hospitality.
well,
Yeah, help people.
Yeah, I don't even want to joke about it because it's such a terrible story. I kind of wish they calls him the old man. I kind of wish he would have stood firmer, but then they might have killed him. I wish the father-in-law would have said, "Hey, travel early because you get more travel time." I mean, there's several things you say, well, I wished I could have, would have done this, but I don't know if it would have made a difference.
Yeah.
It would have made a difference if he would have said, "Do your worst, bring it," and fought those men off and said, "No, this is not going to happen, and you're not going to over my dead body." And that's what we understand would have been right.
Well,
Okay,
and isn't that what Jesus did?
absolutely
Over my dead
body. And so. You fight to keep injustice from happening to people, and you do everything within your power to protect people and to show them a better way. And we have the hope, and he should have had, as an Israelite, should have known the truth of God's presence and the truth of God's guidance. But we actually have it personified in Jesus, and have seen that there is a resurrection. And so this life is not all there is. And so even if we give our very lives in the service of other people and lifting them up and showing the value that they possess, if our lives are taken in the process of that, so be it. We live on. If our physical lives are taken, that's all that is. We live on. Life is much more than what's happening right now. So if someone is being wronged and we have the power to stop it, we better stop it. And we better step in and stand there just like our Savior did and said, "Over my dead body, you will not do these things."
And it goes to that last question at the end. What are we going to do? Who's going to speak up? And so as I look at this, all right, what am I going to do? What am I going to do when I see it? What am I going to do? Am I going to speak up, or am I going to keep my mouth shut? Am I going to make excuses or put something else out there rather than standing in the gap, right? We have that Ezekiel passage that I think is so powerful, where he says, I looked across the world, I was trying to find somebody who would stand in the gap for me on behalf of Israel, and I could find no one. I mean, what a sad commentary, right? But let it not be said of us. Let it not be said of me. I want to be the one that stands in the gap. I want to be the one that does make a difference, whatever it costs. And so...
and little things make a difference. When you see a mother walking into a grocery store and she's got 2 kids under her arms, and you're there first, give her the first buggy. Let her at least have the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I know chivalry's kind of dead, but open the door for people. If somebody's walking with their arms full, open the door for them. I mean, there's little things that to that person might be a huge thing. You just never know about it. And just see how you can touch someone and show them the love of God today.
Absolutely.
I know we're not wrapping up, but
I'm ready to wrap up.
Well, let's wrap it
I'm
up
good.
because I'm sorry if this is short today, but we got nothing left. We've stretched this as far as we can stretch it. So question number 4 is always the same. I'm not going to recommend you share this with anybody. It is the Word of God, and so there's value to it without any stretch of the imagination. But this is a tough one. I think we would all admit that. But we're glad you joined us, and we'll see what happens next week as we look into chapter 20 and the further decline, the further fall when God is removed from His throne. So, go ahead.
Just remember, Samson didn't do this.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
he was just one more leading it to it.
Yeah, he was the catalyst for it. Thank you for that, Keith. Anyway, we'll see you later. Have a great week. God bless.